Hello YouTubers, in this video we're going to be working on my 2007 Chevrolet Silverado LT. The issue that we're having on this truck is I have problems with the upper control arms. I hear a vibration or something as I'm going up my driveway or going over speed bumps. Just something feels like it's shifting. So I'm going to start with the upper ball joints and on both sides, because I think it's this side, but with 300,000 miles, I may as well do them both. So let's get the truck turned around so I can drag my tools back and forth easy, and we will get to work on the upper control arms. One thing before we get going on this, I meant to mention, is don't let where this part is, the weight of the part, the size of the part, keep you from doing this work yourself. It's just a part. It has 3 bolts, 3 nuts, and that's it. This looks like it's going to be a simple job. We will see as we go along, but I think it's going to be simple enough. So again, let's get the truck turned around. Real quick, let me splice this into the video. This is after the fact. So one of the things I wanted to mention about this and about tools in general is this guy here was the most used tool I had. I used this to help hold the suspension in place. I helped it lower it down gradually when I needed it to lower down gradually. I used it to bring it back up when I needed to bring the suspension back up to get the parts to join back together. If you don't have a floor jack, I probably wouldn't start this job without it. It's a necessary tool. Borrow one or rent one or get one. And as it relates to tools as well, I used an assortment of tools and breaker bars. This is an extendable breaker bar. Very necessary for all of this. I used an assortment. Your truck may be different. You may not have the original A-arms, control arms on your truck, and so therefore these tools may not, the sizes may be different. I will say I used 1/2-inch sockets for everything. I have 3/8, but I bet I didn't come into this drawer at all. I spent my time in that drawer and with that device. Okay, so the parts I've chosen to go with are Duralast gold parts. I looked online and these are greasable. The AC Delcos are not, and the original equipment Chevrolet are not. And I thought, I don't know, greasable, it's gotta be good. That way I can take care of it every time I do an oil change or something. But here are the parts. I'll pop up the numbers down below on in the area description. And 1-4, let's just open one up. It's still hermetically sealed. Anyway, we'll review the part in a little bit more detail when we go to take the old one out. But these are okay, with the control arm, where we're going to start is I've already taken this bracket here out. That was a 10mm, and I've taken the brake sensor wire out of the clasp. That was with a screwdriver. And so now, here's the meaty parts. We want to remember where these camber adjustments are. I'm going to try to put them back as close to that as possible. This is our alignment piece, and I want to be able to get it back to the shop without tearing stuff up, or an alignment shop without tearing it up. So I want to make sure these are all close to where they are now. All right, so next thing we want to do is to get this loosened, not all the way, because we're going to break it free, and that's an 18mm. So I've got my 18mm on there. Now I'm just going to break it loose. The nut is loose, and now I'm going to take my pickle fork and hammer it underneath here to break the upper control arm free from the knuckle. So for me, holding the pickle fork at this angle versus this angle did the trick. Came right out with some persuasion. Now our bolt is still in, everything's intact. Before I take this part off, let's get these bolts here. There are 21s. I believe that's a 20 on the inside. Anyway, I'll pop it up on the screen and let's get these out on both sides. One thing to note. So what I'm about to mention here is that bolt that I'm pointing to. Well, in order to get that bolt out, and if you can look on the other side of the spring, you'll see the other bolt. They have to slide in toward the spring. And as you can see, there's plenty of room for that bolt to slide in and out, right? Now, on the other side of the truck, I was not that lucky. The bolt hit the spring. So what I did on the other side of the truck, it can help you, is I loosened the top strut bolts all together. All three of them. I didn't take them out. I loosened them good. And then I was able to finagle the strut around by loosening the bottom strut bolts as well to the lower control arm. There's just 2 bolts holding it on. That gave me a lot of play and able to move that spring around so that I could get those bolts out. Don't be alarmed by it. It was super easy. 2 bolts on the bottom strut, loosen the top 3 bolts, move the spring around, get those bolts out, move it around and get them back in if you happen to have that problem. Not a big deal. See how this needs to come all the way across. I think we're lucky on my truck. We'll see. But that bolt needs to come all the way through. And it doesn't look like anything's impeding on it. Same thing on this side. Could be wrong. We'll see when we get to it. But let's first break these loose. Okay, the bolts are loose and off, actually, both sides. Now I want to grab this off. So let's get our 18mm and finish getting that off. That'll free up the arm so that we can maneuver it. Okay, so in order to get this out properly, you need to suspend this knuckle. Mine's a 2-wheel drive, as you can see, no axle. But I'm holding one side with a brake caliper tool. I got another one hooked to the spring, and I've got my wires and my control arm free and with looseness. So let's get these bolts here out. I'm going to persuade them out with a hammer. I'm gonna put the screw back on it and put the hammer to it and get it to break free. Shouldn't be too hard. You can see it moving. So anyway, let's get these bolts out. Also, let's remember where these go. These go, this here goes in here. And when we put the bolt back on later, it needs to go in that groove. So this is the outside one, outside. When I get to the inside, I'll put it on the inside so I know where they came from. All right, let's get the bolt out and this camber adjustment out and on both sides. So one thing to note as I'm trying to get this out, it's not a big deal, but I'm gonna want this camber adjustment, I'm gonna want this camber adjustment to stay in place while I pull the bolt out, because it'll just hit against the spring. So I can't do it one-handed. Almost can. Anyway, you see the dilemma. Let me keep that attached to the body and pull that bolt out. Okay, the bolts are out. Inside, outside, outside of the outside. Inside, outside, outside of the inside. Notice the mark. All right, this thing should want to come out. And there we are. I don't think my noise is coming from this. This doesn't, I mean, it's loose, but it's, maybe it is. Anyway, let's grab a new one and put her in. Okay, what I've taken is a pry bar and just wedged it in places to get it to pick up to the right level so that it's, lined up as good as it's going to get. So now let's put the bolt in this side. Okay, this side is in, this side here is in. I'm not worried about where they are yet. When I go to tighten them down, I will. So let's get the outside of this. Anyway, I'm gonna get the outside of that one in and put the bolt on. Same thing with that side. So the system's back in, nice and neat. The camber adjustments are close to what they once were. Now I'm gonna pull this off. And now let's insert that into here. So I'm not going to mislead you. Getting that to line up in here was a little bit difficult, being one person with one hand, and I was trying to record this and it didn't work out. Anyway, all I did was push the control arm down, help hold that knuckle in place. I had to remove my bracket caliper hooks and then just get that thing down in there. Now what I ended up using as well was my jack. I lifted up on the bottom of the knuckle, pushing it up toward the top of the truck so that it could meet the control arm. And once I did that, I could get my nut started on the bottom of the upper control arm, and that's all I needed to do. And put the bolt on. It came with a new nut, by the way. Somewhere. Here's a new nut and a cotter pin. So let me do that cap real quick. Where we left off, I had started the nut onto the control arm at the knuckle, and I got that bolt started. And what I did then was torque these to 140 foot-pounds. That's what they torque to. It doesn't really matter because it's got to go in for an alignment, but even though it's got to drive, for me, a few miles, I went ahead and torqued it to 140 foot-pounds. Like I mentioned down here in the video, the ball joint at the knuckle torques to 37 foot-pounds. Now, one thing I wanted to show you why I put back on the wheel. So let me show you. So the reason I put on the wheel is I wanted to show you the grease fitting. I wanted to make sure the grease fitting was facing a direction that wasn't going to be in the way of the wheel. I didn't know how much room I had, so I put the wheel back on, and now I know that this is not going to be in the way of a grease gun being able to reach it down the road. So I wanted to make sure I tighten that, because that comes with the kit. Tighten it with a 10mm to the direction that I wanted it to be. So that is good. All right, YouTubers, that's it for the upper control arm. Everything's in place. Everything's looking good. My fitting's facing where I want it. Everything up here is nice and neat. Yeah, so there's only 3 bolts to this thing. It's not a very hard job. Don't let the component deceive you. It's not hard work. It's not rocket science either. All you're trying to do is get those bolts out, making sure they don't hit the spring, get the one out at the knuckle, and you should be off and running, getting new control arms in place. Very, very easy job in my mind. So YouTubers, if you like the video,